Hello, this is Joel Blackford with Beth Hassett Sabbath Fellowship in St. Paul, Minnesota, coming to you one more time with one of these biblical, historic, and prophetic patterns videos. This is number 6. Hopefully you can see 1 through 5 before you watch this because you would be rather lost. You wouldn't see all the patterns and all the possibilities for patterns. We've covered only the high points, but we've covered quite a few different patterns. We've covered things like the creation week and those 6,000 years that we've come through, and then hopefully the 7,000th year will be the millennium when Yeshua celebrates with us. We've covered 2,000-year increments, 1,000-year increments. We've covered the first Enoch 700-year increments. We've covered the Shemitah time frames of 7 years with the 7th year rest, the 50-year Jubilee cycle, and we've covered also Daniel 9 and Bullinger's 490 years time frames, and then we've also gone forward with the ones that I've discovered going forward, and we'll show you those again just briefly, so that we've covered all of these possibilities for all these patterns, and we want to show you some of these again. So this is one more time with Daniel 2 with the dream, but Daniel 7 talks about the same beasts and things like that, how Nebuchadnezzar seems to be like the beast, the Antichrist during the end times. Cyrus reminds us of Suleiman the Magnificent, how he was blessing Israel in rebuilding the Eastern Gate and covering up the old Eastern Gate. Alexander reminds us of Pope Benedict IX, which provided a schism and broke things up into 4 pieces with Alexander and 2 pieces, if not more, with the schism. And then Caesar, of course, Justinian was just like Caesar and those Caesars, and he kept that Roman system going. And you can see the patterns time and time again. They repeat or they rhyme. I'd like to show you one more time this diagram of how it's like intricate DNA, how you have the 50-year patterns of the Jubilee, the 7-year Shemitah patterns, and then also you have these 490-year patterns that coexist together in this harmonious DNA string. This is Judah ben Samuel's prophecy one more time so you can see it, that he prophesied it in 1217. He said in 300 years in 1517, the Turks would take over Jerusalem. They would control it for 400 years. Then you'd have no man's land in 1917 until 1967. Then Israel would control it. And then the millennial time frame would start in 2017. Of course, nothing has happened in 2017, but I still want you to see this chart. Then, of course, we're covering the Jubilee time frame. We believe that it was 2017 through 2018. And once again, nothing happened. But we still want you to see the patterns so that you can see that maybe Yeshua is the one that's delaying all of this right now. He's asking for time. So here's one more time, the Jubilee. This man shows it in 1917, 1918 with Balfour and Allenby, then 1948 with the Freedom War, and then another war in 67, and then 27 to 2018. We expected something to happen. And he was also looking at the Creator's Jubilee, which took us to the Blood Moon Tetrad of 2014, 2015. There are many convergences going on during this time frame, so we want you to look at some of them that are important. Man is allotted 120 years to live, so from 1897 plus 120 years, you get 2017. Okay, and that's Theodore Herzl and the Zionist Congress. Then 1917 plus 2 Jubilee timeframes is 2017. Then 1947-48 plus 7 years is 2017-2018. Makes sense. 1967 plus a Jubilee is 2017. 1977, Anwar Sadat makes peace with Israel, and we've really had peace since then, and that ended in 2017. So everything's ready to go, and we thought things would start moving forward in 2017, 2018. Nothing's happened really, but things are happening. In 2017, on December 6th, Donald Trump acted like Cyrus and declared that our embassy would move to Jerusalem. So this is 18 Kislev of 5778. So just prior to Hanukkah, he announced that the embassy is moving. So it's very, very interesting how all of these things are convergent. Other signs that were interesting, during the time of this great Spanish flu in 1918, we had a sign, an eclipse over America. Then on August 21st of 2017, we had another interesting eclipse, a solar eclipse, and it went through America and went through Missouri, the New Madrid fault line. Then on April 8th of 2024, it will cross again over New Madrid. We don't know why this has occurred. These are signs that we should be aware of, but we don't know what they mean. Then if you also look at 2017, you see this odd message come through. This is from a Harvard scientist that suggests that something was sent by aliens, like he called it Oumuamua. And it is, he says it's a visitor from a great distance, which is what it means in Hawaiian. And it was discovered in 2017, just about that time of when you would declare the Jubilee. And he's saying it's a message from aliens. And this is what he describes it as. It didn't look like that. It looks more like a cigar. But it's still interesting how it was a light sail and a visit from another solar system to ours. We need to run through the seals because I believe we're jumping towards the fourth seal very, very shortly. So this is linear. So seal 1, then you get to seal 2, seal 3, and seal 4 should happen at any point in time. Then seal 5 is beheading, then seal 6. So let's look at them more in depth for a minute here. Israel has the land in 1967. They have the Temple Mount. They have complete control. They win the Six-Day War. Diane hands back the Temple Mount to Jordanian control. This delayed the Messiah by 50 years. Then in 2001, 9/11, we have this second seal open up east of Jerusalem. And by the way, with the first seal, that means that Western civilization has been falling apart ever since then, and it has been. East of Jerusalem, well, Cheney and Bush and all of these warmongers traded money for oil. Back in 2001 through 2003, they set up a complex system of war in these Muslim countries that are producing oil so that they could take control of them and make money off the oil. And so they destabilized all of these Middle East countries so that their companies that they were affiliated with could make money. The third seal is north. I was part of that prophecy. If you want to refer back to that video, you'll see in chapter 6 how I describe it more in depth. But Hurricane Sandy fulfilled it. It was fulfilling Jeroboam's false Sukkot, and it happened sometime during about Av 9 of 2012. That's when things opened up. And so you'll notice that the poor people eating wheat and barley would be affected by that, but the rich people, they could care less if their wine and oil costs more. The fourth seal we're waiting for, that's a death of 1.8 billion people, and that would be war, famine, plagues, and therion, as I call it, which is like, it's like biowarfare, but with a, it's kind of connected to yeast-like movements and growth. So just keep that in mind that we're waiting for something like a World War III, but not completely. It's more regional, but it will produce a lot of death. Then the fifth seal is going to be the martyrdom of believers. In the Greek, it's sphadzo. It's shek or shekin in the Hebrew. That would mean that believers would be bound hand and foot, and their throats would be slit ritually. And when you see that happening by ISIS right now and many other places, you realize that that's a start of the fifth seal, but you'll see even more death as we move forward. The sixth seal is survivable. It is cataclysmic, cosmic, and natural disasters. It's funny how cataclysmic sounds just like that in the Greek too. Earthquakes, volcanoes, rapid polar and continental drift, plus asteroids and other heavenly signs will portend this dire seal. Expect an eerie silence after the seal as we hit the seventh seal. So the fourth seal is what we expect to see soon. That would mean that we would see the green horsemen south of Jerusalem, and it would bring death and wars and famine and disease and therion, the biological warfare. Then we'll see the fourth seal. When the Lamb opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and there before me was a pale, that's chloros in the Greek, that is green, a green horse. Pale green, though, probably. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power, exousia, over a fourth of the earth to kill with the sword. That's a rumphea, that's a long sword. So the power is a delegated power. The rumphea is a long sword that you would wear, that you would use from a chariot or from a horse, and you would be driving down into the chest cavity. It's a supernatural sword. It discerns whether you're with God or against God. He brings famine, plague, and by the wild beast, the therion, as I mentioned. That's biowarfare and more yeast-like than anything. That is a picture from the second day after Passover, after the first blood moon tetrad of 2014. So it would have been about April 17th of 2014. And this man shot this picture. It's over Washington, D.C., but technically he was in southern New Jersey, and he wondered what it meant. And I said, that's a rumphea sword that was hanging as judgment over the United States during that time frame, during the blood moon tetrad time frame. Then during that time frame, starting, and now we see more signs of it, Iran has been fomenting war the whole way through, and other countries too. But Iran has been unveiling more long-range cruise missiles, especially on their anniversary. And so their cruise missiles can definitely hit Israel now 800 miles away, and they're celebrating and celebrating and celebrating until they can finally invoke their Mahdi. So they want to bring in the 12th Imam, which is the Mahdi, which is like we would view him as the Antichrist. And so what happens is if they can hasten it by blowing up Israel, they believe that he'll show up and he will redeem them. He won't redeem Israel. He would be the Antichrist. Michael Snyder explains it this way. He says, Iran and Israel are closer than ever to an all-out war. Iran fires missiles into Israel. Israel responds with guided missile launch. And so Israel is freewheeling back at Iran into Syria right now. So Iran is putting missiles into Syria, into Lebanon, and into Gaza. And then they also have missiles on their side too. So keep this in mind. All-out war between Israel and Iran in which both sides use their weapons of mass destruction could happen soon. And this is January 21st. Michael Snyder's writing this. He's a friend of mine. And so he agrees with me in many, many ways. Much of this is over war. So let's look at the countries producing the most. Most of this is over oil wars, rather. Venezuela is number one. They have the most proven oil reserves. They don't have the sweet light crude, but they have a heavier, darker crude, but they have the most of it in the world today. It takes a different process to refine it, but it's still valuable. And so they have the most by far. Saudi Arabia has the most light crude oil. And Canada's in there. Iran, there they are, number 4. Iraq, number 5. Well, have you seen where Cheney and Bush have started the wars? Well, let's see here. We've destabilized Venezuela many years ago. Saudi Arabia, we're always talking to them. Iran, we've tried to destabilize. Iraq, yes, definitely. Kuwait, definitely. UAE, rather. In Russia, well, we're constantly causing problems there. But Libya, we have had problems there, obviously, and we started many of those problems. The 4th seal, once again, will kill 1.8 billion people by the sword, which is the Ramphea. That discernment sword, that supernatural sword by famine, pestilence, and wild beasts. Then the 5th seal starts, and that is where you have martyrdom, you are bound, and you're beheaded. We've seen it already. This is a picture of ISIS. They are killing people of the star, of David's star, and people of the cross. And so what they do is they bind them and they slit their throats, and they try to make it as conspicuous as possible so that people will be afraid. They're horrible people. Then we move on to the 6th seal, which is great signs and earthquakes and asteroids. During the 6th seal, you'll see some cosmological changes, and these will be known like birth pangs. There will appear signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and on the earth, nations will be in anxiety and bewilderment at the sound and surge of the sea, as people faint with fear at the prospect of what has overtaken the world, for the powers in heaven will be shaken. That's Luke 21, 25, and 26. So you'll see these great changes as we move closer and closer and closer to the end of the birth pangs, which I described as the seals. Solar radiation is constantly bombarding the Earth, but the Earth's magnetic field repels it. According to a new study, our planet's protective shield might weaken far more quickly and unpredictably than scientists previously thought. And that's the truth. It's shrunk by 10% from 1880 to 2000, another 5% rather, from 2000 to 2010, and then it's shrinking 10% faster now from 2010 to 2013, 2015. So it's shrinking very, very quickly. Are these cosmological changes, or is this part of a catastrophic cycle? If the poles reverse, that's catastrophic. And right now, the poles are heading towards Russia, but they were heading towards Canada. So they switched. There's a wobble going on. And now that magnetic pole, the North Pole, magnetic North Pole, is moving towards Russia very quickly and chasing the Russians down south because the Russians will freeze. So they need to move further south. So that's why they would take over certain areas that were their satellites years ago, and now they want them back again. And how do you stop Putin when he has that many nukes? And they're fast nukes now, too. The solar spots, the solar cycles, and things like that are lessening. So they go up, they go down. We are in a weakening time frame right now. So these are the daily sunspot numbers, and you can see since 1980, every cycle is weakened and weakened and weakened. They go into 11-year and 22-year cycles, and we are in the midst of weakening each time. So this causes more war and famine and disease and therion attacks, which is the fourth seal, and it all matches up with when you look at the Maunder minimum of 1540, or rather 1640 to 1780, you will see the same problems during that time frame. More wars popped up as people had to move south and migrate. This is someone that I follow very closely. His name is Ben Davidson. He's part of suspiciousobservers.org. And so what he is doing is recording each day what's going on with the sun and how it's not random. It is part of a pattern. As the sun goes, so goes our weather. And so he is able to see the cause and the effect each day of what's occurring with the sun, whether it's active or inactive, whether there's a coronal mass ejection or there's a coronal hole, which causes, like if you're shoveling along, it would be like the shovel blade picking up more and bunching it up and catching up with the rest when they strike the earth. So you get these waves from the coronal holes too when the sun isn't active. He talks about the catastrophe cycle. Cosmic rays can trigger solar flashes, Earth core eruptions, and pole shifts. Massive pole shifts are cyclic, according to the CIA, and then impending solar flash event supported by scientific studies and insider testimony. So he's come up with so many different theories of what's going on. Either it's a catastrophe, or it could be part of just an ongoing process. We've seen this before, and if you watch my next video after this, number 7, you'll see how we've been part of these cycles before with these great cataclysms. Now, this is from another source. This is Breaking Israel News, and I watch them all the time and read their reports. This is a report done by Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz, and it's on Saul Kulak. And so what he's saying is that there are certain time frames when the Jews come back to Israel, and it's based on a mathematical formula that proves this prophecy. So he describes it this way. The simplest possible terms, the inclination of the planet on the year of the immigration plus the constant angular value equals the latitude of a border of Israel. So Kulak said, this means inclination of the Earth's axis has decreased continuously during the 3,500 years investigated in this study from the biblical time of Israel crossing the Jordan River after their biblical exodus from Egypt until present times. And so it's like, think of it like a homing pigeon returning to home. It notices the change in the electromagnetic waves, and then it returns based on those waves. So for each point in time, biblical and historical, the Earth's axis has a different mean inclination or axial tilt. For the contrary, the latitude of physical and biblical borders or places are fixed geographical values obtained in accordance with the book of Joshua. The algorithm is a mathematical expression of involving a correlation between points in time of history and the latitude of a place or border in the biblical land of Israel. The formula means that if I know the latitude of the border, I subtract the constant angular value to obtain the mean inclination of the Earth from where the time at which this inclination took place gives the date of the event. Conversely, if I know the date, I could use the formula, insert the axial value, and get the latitude of the border. This is an absolute correlation. Put simply, the discovery shows that the Jews come back to Israel at fixed times that are in a set of forces of nature in the sun, stars, and the Earth. It's very cool. Now, let's look at it and see what the next Exodus will look like, because the Jews will have an Exodus during the end times. So this is from Isaiah 4:4-6. When Adonai washes away the filth of the women of Zion and cleanses Jerusalem from the blood shed in it, with a blast of searing judgment, Adonai will create over the whole site of Mount Zion, and over those who assemble there, a smoking cloud by day. We've seen that before in the first Exodus, and a shining, bright, flaming fire by night. We've seen that during the first Exodus. For the glory will be over everything like a huppah. That's a marriage type of a tent covering. A sukkah will give shade by day from the heat and also provide refuge and cover from storm and rain. Well, so what we've seen with Moses, we're going to see as Isaiah describes it here. Now, we have to discuss the Big Bang, and we have to discuss the patterns of the Big Bang. So the Big Bang starts out at that finite little tiny point there, and then it explodes out like that into patterns. The problem is you should see randomness with the Big Bang, and we see these beautiful galaxies and clusters and other things like that. We see the 12 signs of the zodiac, whether you believe in astronomy or astrology, they're still up there and they still keep time. And we see solar cycles and other things like that. Everything is perfect. So the Big Bang is interesting because we believe that God did create immediately, but then we see that the Big Bang breaks down because it is so random. And when you see a firecracker explode, you'll see the randomness of it, but you don't see it in creation. So I'm arguing instead intelligent design. Now, quantum theory should be discussed. So quantum theory is the macular look at everything, or rather microscopic. So quantum theory is, if you can't see it by observing what's going on around you, you need to go small and figure out how things work in their rules. So otherwise known as quantum physics or quantum mechanics is one of the two main planks of modern physics, along with general relativity, and between them the two theories claim to explain virtually everything about the universe. So general relativity gives us our picture of this very big space-time and gravity, while quantum theory gives us our picture in a very small, viewing the atoms and their constituents. So if you can't prove it by the large macro, you go micro, and that's what they've done. From the obscure and outlandish idea has come the driving force behind much of the discovery of the modern science. I believe, and this guy does too, Ben Davidson, that electricity, electromagnetism, electrostatic forces, these are the underappreciated elements of our universe underpinning the interactions and phenomena we are yet to fully understand. My premise is our simple electric universe, created to give us an ingenious set of rules for gravity and dimensions like time, is enclosed and nested within another larger universe without time and physical barriers. Continuing on, this is Rational Wiki's opinion of electric universe. It's an umbrella term that covers various pseudo-scientific cosmological ideas built around the claim that the formation and existence of various features of the universe can be better explained by electricity and magnetism than by gravity only, gravity alone. My other premises are electric universe with simple rules like gravity, dimensions, and time is nested within a larger universe, but knowing the rules of this, we can predict when earthquakes might occur or other events might occur triggered by solar magnetism and when things will shake. So by knowing the rules and knowing that we're nested within those rules and knowing prophecy, we know we can predict certain things that will occur, earthquakes, volcanoes, other things like that, just by knowing the electric universe theory. Now, we have to discuss a little bit more about intelligent design. So this comes from a friend of mine named David P. And so he's saying intelligent design is definitely a better question than creationism, as that question brings a lot of theological baggage. So there was a debate a few years ago between Ken Ham and Bill Nye, the science guy. It was horrific because Bill Nye won and Ken Ham didn't do anything other than preach. And he purposely lost the debate to make money for his creation museum. And that was probably part of the deal that he cut with Bill Nye, that Bill Nye would come in and do a silly debate with him as long as he lost and Bill Nye was able to claim the victory. But the problem is you can't hand over something as important to this to hacks like Ken Ham. And so these creationists bring their dogma in with them. So Ken Ham spends all of his time on Genesis 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but he spends no time on Leviticus. He spends no time on Isaiah. He spends too much time looking for a science book in Genesis 1 through 9, and it isn't there. It isn't designed to be our science book. So his hyper-Calvinism, his hyper-literal Genesis 1 through 9, and his blatant ignorance and his bliss over Torah loathing until Matthew and maybe until Paul. But obviously, that's why we can't join in with the creationists, and we can't get down to 6,000 years. There's just no way. I could try to get down to 12,000 years, but what's the point? So we have to look at 4 different points. Evolution by itself, evolution with a secondary intelligent design with a secondary evolution, and the 4th point is intelligent design by itself. And we don't want to bring creationists in on this discussion because they'll bring in Ken Ham, and then the debate's over. So this is according to David again. The fact that Calabi-Yau manifold theory proves that superstring theory isn't likely to be true long term, and thus we have to look back towards the assumption in a mechanical universe that we must be able to rely upon realism or classical locality. But in reality, we can prove that both can be wrong simultaneously. This is the quantum Venn diagram paradox. Then what do we do? Thus, the only logical conclusion is that our universe exists as a nested one inside of a larger host universe, which has a similar but different governing law system. As a result, if this is true, then we must also assume that this host universe is the source for all the matter and energy that both intelligent designers, these advocates, and evolutionists believe was injected into this universe. At this point, we must ask the question if this was done accidentally or purposefully. Since our governing laws are different than the host universe, but the host universe has an influence over our existing laws in our universe, I believe the only logical conclusion is to say that our universe is fully artificial. But that's a good thing. He made it to work for us, to be exactly what we needed at this point in time. Okay, we're getting close to the end of this video, and I want to show you that some patterns are ending. As we end 2017, 2018, 2019, we've seen this wonderful time frame of these eclipses, starting out in 2010, going through 2019. The interesting thing is that these last eclipses now finish the pattern, and so we've seen 40 of these eclipses. We've seen 10 of them that are blood moon eclipses. 4 of them were part of the tetrad down below. And then this is over 9 years. But then they end. Now, there is no pattern going forward with blood moon eclipses or any types of eclipses. They're all random going forward. So we wonder, and we see this midpoint, but we don't know what it means other than we just know that we've run out of a pattern. We've just run out of it. We're jumping through the seals. We've gone through the first, second, third seal. We're waiting for the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth, and then the seventh is silence. According to Prophet Sadhu Sundar Severage, and I trust this man, I've really monitored him closely for a number of years now, the time of the 2 witnesses is soon. It's months and not years. Then this will release the anointing, and they would go into the Great Tribulation. They would pop up before the Great Tribulation, and this is months, not years. So this is the end of this video. This is video number 6, and then be prepared for video number 7. We're getting close to the end of this series unless you can find some other patterns for me if you send me information. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for this.